the hidden fear that destroys creator careers, or why 99% of creators never realize they're sabotaging themselves. Most creators think they have a procrastination problem, or a perfectionism problem, or a motivation problem, but they're wrong. What they actually have is a fear problem. And until they recognize this fundamental truth, they'll continue spinning their wheels, wondering why their talent isn't translating into the success they know they deserve. And after working with hundreds of creators across every medium, from fine artists to YouTubers to freelance designers, I've seen the same thing over and over again. The creators who struggle aren't lacking talent or technical skills or even business acumen, even though they are missing a lot of that. They're paralyzed by an ancient fear that they don't even recognize as fear, the evolutionary trap. Human beings evolved in small tribes where ostracism meant dying. If the group rejected you, you died alone in the wilderness. And this survival mechanism served us well for hundreds of thousands of years, but it's now sabotaging modern creators in ways that would be comical if they weren't so destructive. When you hesitate to post that video or pitch that client or share your work on social media, your primitive brain interprets those actions as potentially dangerous to your social standing. And the same neural pathways that once protected your ancestors from tribal rejection are now preventing you from building the creative career that you want. And the fear manifests in two primary ways: the fear of ostracism and the fear of vulnerability. Fear of ostracism, which is the price of standing out. Every successful creator must eventually stand out from the crowd. This requires taking positions, sharing opinions, and creating work that some people will inevitably dislike. But your brain sees standing out as standing alone, which triggers the ancient fear of ostracism. And this is why so many creators never develop a distinctive style or voice. They avoid sharing controversial or their strongly held opinions. It's why they copy what's already popular instead of innovating. They hesitate to charge premium prices for their work, or they just straight up struggle with self promotion. They're not lazy or they're not ambitious. It's that they're responding to a deep seated fear that being different means being rejected from the group. And the irony is devastating. The very thing that creators fear most, rejection, it's virtually guaranteed if they remain indistinguishable from everyone else in their field. The fear of vulnerability, the exposure problem. Creating anything meaningful requires vulnerability. You must first expose your ideas, your perspective, and ultimately yourself to judgment. Your primitive brain interprets this exposure as a threat to your safety within your social group. This vulnerability fear drives creators to endlessly revise work instead of just sharing it already, waiting for perfect timing that never happens, avoid putting themselves into their work, create safe, generic slop content that offends nobody, refuse to tell their personal stories or share their unique perspectives. What they call perfectionism is actually vulnerability avoidance. What they call procrastination is actually fear of exposure. That leads to the misdiagnosis problem. The tragedy is that 99% of creators never identify fear as the real problem. Instead, they focus on symptoms. They say stuff like, I'm a perfectionist. No, you're afraid of being judged for imperfect work. I procrastinate too much. No, you're avoiding the vulnerability required to ship your work. I lack motivation. No, you're paralyzed by the fear of social rejection. I need better time management. That's a huge trap for productivity folks like me. No, you're subconsciously avoiding activities that feel socially risky. I'm not ready yet. No, you're afraid you'll be exposed as inadequate. This misdiagnosis leads creators to pursue solutions that can't possibly work. They buy productivity apps like Obsidian to solve a fear problem. They take technical courses to address an emotional issue, or they look for motivation when they need courage. The neuroscience of creative fear. Modern neuroscience reveals why these fears feel so overwhelming. The amygdala, which is your brain's alarm system, processes potential social threats faster than your rational mind can evaluate them. By the time you consciously think, I should post this, your brain has already flooded your system with stress hormones in response to the perceived social risk of putting yourself out there. This is why logic by itself rarely overcomes creative blocks. And if you've been in sales longer than 5 minutes, you know that people never sell with logic. They buy with emotions, then justify with logic later. Because, see, your brain literally perceives sharing your work, putting yourself out there, as a survival threat. Telling yourself to just do it is like telling yourself, just stick your hand in the fire. Your nervous system will absolutely, for very good reason, resist your attempts to put your hand in the fire. The courage antidote. The solution isn't getting rid of fear, it's developing courage. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's action in the presence of fear. And successful creators don't feel less afraid than struggling creators. They've simply learned to act despite the fear. They've developed what I call fear tolerance, the ability to experience the physiological symptoms of fear without being paralyzed by them. That's exactly what I did, about ready to step out on stage for America's Got Talent in front of 3,000 live people, who knows how many video cameras, and 4 celebrity judges. That is a terrifying experience, but I just said, "Here we go," right? So, there are actually 3 shifts that you need to make to move forward. And the first is recognition. First, you must correctly identify fear as the real problem. Stop calling it perfectionism or procrastination or lack of motivation. Call it what it is: fear of social rejection and being vulnerable. Number two, reframing. Understand that the fear you feel when creating and sharing your work isn't evidence that you're in any kind of danger. It's evidence that you're doing something important. The bigger the fear, the more significant the potential impact and benefit to you and your career and everything you care about. So, step three is all about graduated exposure. Like overcoming a phobia, you've got to gradually expose yourself to what it is that you're scared of. Start with small acts of creative courage and build your tolerance over time. So, what's the practical way forward? For creators who are ready to confront this hidden fear, start with awareness. Notice when you avoid creative tasks and ask yourself, okay, what am I really afraid of here? Usually it's some form of social judgment or rejection. Reframe the fear response. When you feel that familiar anxiety before hitting publish or send, remind yourself, this feeling means I'm about to do something that matters. Make that your mantra. Take small, regular risks. Share work before it's perfect. Express opinions you're unsure about. Put yourself into your content and build your tolerance for social risk gradually. And remember the real risk. The greatest risk isn't that people will reject your work, it's that you'll never share it in the first place. A creator who never shares their work is guaranteed to fail. Anybody who shares imperfect work at least has a chance to succeed. So, the liberation, the freedom. Once creators recognize fear as the real enemy, everything changes. Suddenly, the internal resistance makes sense. The procrastination patterns become predictable. The perfectionism reveals itself as the defense mechanism that it really is. And more importantly, you can finally address the actual problem instead of fighting symptoms. You can develop genuine courage instead of temporary motivation. You can build systems for managing fear instead of just hoping that it goes away. And the creators who build sustainable, profitable careers aren't the ones who feel less fear. It never gets easier, right? They're the ones who understand that fear is the price of admission to creative significance. They've learned to pay that price willingly, knowing that on the other side of fear lies everything they've ever wanted to achieve. So your fear isn't holding you back because you're weak or broken. It's holding you back because you're human, and humans are wired to avoid social risk. But in a world where standing out is the only path to creative success, learning to manage this ancient fear isn't optional. It's the difference between a creative hobby and a creative career. The choice, as always, is yours. Remember, if you can change your mind, you can change your life. See you in the next video.